Consider this example. This example is practically the same as the previous one, with only one difference. In this example, we have the VAT rate which is written in this cell. And what we're going to do is that we are going to calculate the VAT based on this cell. The reason is so that if the VAT rate changes, we can just change the VAT rate from this cell and automatically all the VAT calculations will be updated. So let's start by finding the subtotals. And the subtotals can be found by multiplying this with the quantities. And if we replicate, subtotals are calculated accordingly. Now let's find the VAT using this cell. And let's observe what's going to happen. So I am going to find the VAT by multiplying this with this. And I have my first VAT result. But if I try to replicate that cell, we can notice that the other VAT calculations are missing. The reason for this is that when we have calculated the VAT for that cell, we have multiplied this cell with this cell. Now, if we check the VAT of the next row, for the next row, we are multiplying this cell, which is the correct subtotal, with this cell, which, as you can note, it is empty. Now, while this cell is correct, its reference has been moved one row downwards, this one is totally wrong, because it doesn't make sense to move the VAT reference downwards, because obviously we have only one VAT rate written there. The same thing applies for the other VAT calculations. So the problem here is that when we are replicating, all referenced cells are moving one row downwards. Now in this case, we want to set Excel to only move to one row downwards the cells being used for the subtotals, and not the cell being used to store the VAT rate. There are two approaches of how to solve this issue. Let's start with the first approach. When we are writing this formula, we can introduce the use of the $sign by encapsulating the column name of the cell that we would like to be set as static. In other words, to that cell that we don't want the replicate function to replicate its reference. So what we can do is we can encapsulate the letter B with $signs. As you can see in the formula. If we press enter and then we replicate, the VAT rate and the VAT calculations are now being done correct. In fact, if we have a look at the references of this cell is making a reference of this and this. If we look at the other one, it is making a reference of this, which has been moved one row downwards, and this, which haven't been moved. The same applies for this and for the last row. So that is one possible approach. The other approach is to make use of cell naming. And personally, I suggest that you try to avoid the use of the dollar sign and instead use cell naming. By cell naming, we can keep our Excel sheets much more neater and user-friendly. So to do cell referencing, we have to do this. The first thing is that we have to select cell where we have our vet rate and give a name to that cell. Now to give a name to that cell, all you have to do is to click here in the name box and write a unique name. For example, vet rate. Please note that when writing cell names, you cannot include spaces. If you want to include a space, please use an underscore, as I have done in this example. Once the name is written, press enter. Now all we have to do is, in this cell, I am going to write the formula equals subtotal times the vet rate. And I am going to choose the vet rate from there. This name is making a reference to the cell that we have named a few seconds ago. I can choose it, press enter, and we can replicate. And our bill is now done.